The Beatles were humiliated at their first concert in ECSTATIC, until their second song left everyone ecstatic. Washington, D.C., February 11, 1964. The Washington Coliseum. 2 days after the Beatles conquered Ed Sullivan. 2 days after 73 million Americans watched them on television. But tonight is different. Tonight they have to prove it wasn't just TV magic. John Lennon stands backstage. His hands are shaking, not from excitement, from something darker, fear. Because what nobody knows yet, what even the other Beatles don't fully understand, is that Washington, D.C. doesn't want them here. The local promoters had fought against booking them. British invasion, one had scoffed, more like British embarrassment. Give it 2 weeks and nobody will remember their names. The venue itself is hostile. The Washington Coliseum is a boxing arena, not a concert hall. The stage is in the center, surrounded on all sides by 92 seats, most of them filled with people who came to mock, not to celebrate. This is mental, George Harrison says, looking out at the crowd through a crack in the curtain. Half of them look like they want to kill us. He's not wrong. The audience is divided. Teenage girls who saw Ed Sullivan and fell in love, and everyone else. Parents who think the Beatles are a threat to American values. Music critics ready to write scathing reviews. Local musicians who resent these foreigners stealing their spotlight. Paul McCartney tries to stay positive. We'll win them over, he says, just like we did in Liverpool, just like we did in Hamburg. But John isn't so sure, because this isn't Liverpool, this isn't Hamburg, this is America. And America is waiting for them to fail. The lights go down. 92 people make noise. But it's not all cheering. Mixed in with the screams of teenage girls are boos, laughter, hostile jeers. The Beatles walk onto the stage. John, Paul, George, and Ringo, 4 boys from Liverpool, about to face the cruelest audience of their lives. The stage setup is a nightmare because it's in the center of the arena. They have to rotate their equipment every few songs, so each section of the audience gets a front view. But it also means they're surrounded, exposed, vulnerable. The boos get louder as they take their positions. Look at their hair, someone shouts, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. They look like girls, another voice yells, more laughter. The teenage girls are screaming, but they're being drowned out by mockery, by hostility, by America deciding these British boys need to be put in their place. John looks at Paul, Paul looks at George, George looks at Ringo, and in that moment they all understand this could be the night that ends everything. They launch into Roll Over Beethoven, a Chuck Berry cover, an American song, hoping it will win over the crowd, but something goes wrong. The sound system is terrible. The acoustics in the boxing arena are awful. The Beatles can barely hear themselves play. The audience can barely hear them at all. What comes through the speakers is muddy, distorted, nothing like what people heard on Ed Sullivan. The boos get louder. We can't hear you, someone shouts. Go back to England, another voice screams. John's fingers fumble on the guitar. Paul misses a harmony. George's solo is lost in the terrible acoustics. Even Ringo's usually perfect timing seems off by the time they finish. Roll Over Beethoven. The hostile section of the audience is laughing openly. The music critics are already writing their reviews in their heads. British invasion over before it began. Beatles proved to be all hype, no substance. America's rock and roll is safe. The teenage girls are still screaming, but even they sound uncertain now, wondering if maybe their parents were right. Maybe the Beatles aren't that special after all. Paul steps to the microphone, trying to salvage the situation. Thank you, Washington, D.C., he says, his voice bright and cheerful, but you can hear the strain underneath. Speak English, someone yells, more laughter. John feels rage building, the same rage he felt on Ed Sullivan, but this is worse, because this time they're not just being mocked before they play, they're being mocked while they play. Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without notice. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any of the exclusive content that's coming up. And while you're there, leave that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who is part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. John Lennon walks to the microphone, his jaw set, his eyes hard. He's done being polite, done trying to win over people who have already decided to hate them. All right, John says into the microphone, his Liverpool accent thick and defiant. I can see some of you came here to laugh at us. That's fine. We've been laughed at before. The arena goes quieter, curious about where this is going. But I'll tell you something, John continues. We didn't come all the way from Liverpool to be your dancing monkeys. We came here to play music, real music. And if you don't want to listen, that's your loss. Paul looks nervous. This isn't how they usually handle hostile crowds, but something in John's voice, something raw and honest, is starting to shift the energy in the room. This next song, John says, is called I Saw Her Standing There, and I don't care if you hate it. I don't care if you boo, because we're going to play it like our lives depend on it. He counts off. 1, 2, 3, 4, and something happens. Maybe it's John's defiance. Maybe it's the anger fueling their performance. Maybe it's just that the sound system finally starts working properly. But when they launch into I Saw Her Standing There, everything changes. The opening guitar riff hits like lightning. Paul's bass line is thunderous. Ringo's drums are driving and perfect. And when Paul starts singing, his voice is clear and powerful, cutting through every doubt, every bit of mockery. Well, she was just 17. You know what I mean. The energy is electric. Not polished, not perfect, but real, raw, undeniable. The teenage girls who had been uncertain start screaming again, louder than before, but more importantly, the people who came to mock start paying attention, because what's coming through those speakers now isn't what they expected. This isn't some manufactured pop group. This is a real band, playing real rock and roll, with real passion. John's rhythm guitar is aggressive. Paul's vocals are soaring. George's lead guitar cuts through like a knife. And Ringo's drumming holds it all together, with a power that can't be denied. And the way she looked was way beyond compare. By the time they hit the bridge, the entire arena is transformed. The boos have stopped. The laughter has died. Even the harshest critics are sitting up straighter, paying attention, because something undeniable is happening. 4 boys from Liverpool are showing America what real music sounds like. 3 minutes in 25 seconds. That's how long I Saw Her Standing There lasts. 3 minutes and 25 seconds to change everything. When the song ends, there's a moment of silence. 1 heartbeat, 2, then the screaming starts. Not just from the teenage girls, from everyone. The parents who came to disapprove, the critics who came to write bad reviews, the local musicians who came to see these British kids fail, all of them on their feet, screaming, applauding, transformed from mockers to believers. John looks at Paul. Paul looks at George. George looks at Ringo, and they all understand they did it, but they're not done. Thank you, Paul shouts into the microphone, his voice now confident, triumphant. We're the Beatles from Liverpool, and we're just getting started. They launch into From Me to You. And the arena goes even more insane, because now everyone understands. This isn't a fluke. This isn't TV magic. This is real talent, real musicianship, real magic. The sound that had been muddy during the first song is now crystal clear, because the sound engineers, shocked by what they're hearing, have finally adjusted the levels properly. And what comes through those speakers is revolutionary. The harmonies are perfect. 3 voices blending into something that America has never heard before. The energy is infectious. The joy is palpable. The talent is undeniable. By the time they finish From Me to You, the Washington Coliseum is in complete chaos. Girls are fainting. People are crying. The critics who came to write bad reviews are frantically rewriting them in their heads. because they've just witnessed the birth of something that will change music forever. The Beatles have to rotate their equipment, so the other sections of the arena can see them. During this rotation, something beautiful happens. The audience, who were hostile just 20 minutes ago, start chanting, "Beatles, Beatles, Beatles," not mockingly, but with genuine enthusiasm, with love, with respect. John Lennon, drenched in sweat, looks out at the crowd and smiles, not his usual cocky smile, but something softer, more grateful. "You know what?" John says into the microphone. "You lot aren't so bad after all." The audience laughs, but it's friendly laughter now, the kind that comes from shared experience, from mutual respect. "We were scared coming here tonight," John admits. And this honesty, this vulnerability, makes the audience love them even more. "We thought you were going to hate us," John continues, "and for a minute there it seemed like you did." "We love you," a girl screams. "Well, we love you too," John says, and means it. They perform This Boy, a slow, harmony-heavy song. That shows they can do more than just rock, and the arena, that was screaming and chaotic moments ago, goes completely silent. 92 people, listening, really listening, to three voices, blending in perfect harmony, creating something beautiful, something that touches the soul. When the song ends, the applause is different, not screaming, but respectful, appreciative, the kind of applause you give to real artists. Near the end of the concert, something happens that John Lennon will never forget. During Twist and Shout, their closing number, John notices something. In the crowd, a man in his 50s, wearing a suit, standing in the section that had been the most hostile. He's not screaming, not jumping, but he's smiling, really smiling, and tapping his foot. John makes eye contact with him, and the man gives him a thumbs up. It's a small gesture, but it means everything, because that man represents everyone who came to mock, everyone who thought the Beatles were a joke, everyone who was ready to write them off. And now he's a believer. After the concert, after the screaming has died down, after the arena has emptied, the Beatles sit in their dressing room, exhausted, exhilarated, changed. "Did that really just happen?" George asks, his voice full of wonder. "I think it did," Paul says. "I think we actually did it." But John is quiet, thinking about that man in the suit, thinking about the journey from boos to standing ovations. "You know what I learned tonight?" John says finally. The others look at him. "I learned that you can't win everyone over by being what they expect," John says. "You win them over by being yourself, even if it scares you, even if it makes you vulnerable." "We could have played it safe tonight," John continues. "We could have tried to be what they wanted us to be, but instead we were just us." And that's what changed everything. The reviews came out the next day, and they were unanimous. The Beatles proved last night that they're not just a fad, they're the future of rock and roll. What started as a hostile crowd ended as a love fest. The Beatles didn't just perform, they conquered. America came to mock the Beatles and left as believers. But the real impact of that night wasn't in the reviews, it was in what happened next. Radio stations across America started playing Beatles songs non-stop. Record stores sold out of Beatles albums in hours. And most importantly, other venues that had been hesitant to book them started calling. The Washington Coliseum concert became the template for every Beatles concert that followed. The rotating stage, the mix of rock and ballads, the honest connection with the audience, but more than that, it became a lesson about resilience, about authenticity, about refusing to be broken by mockery. Years later, Paul McCartney would say, "Washington, D.C. was the night we became the Beatles, not on Ed Sullivan, but in that boxing arena, where we had to prove ourselves to people who didn't want to believe." John Lennon, in one of his final interviews, said something even more profound. "That night in Washington taught me that the people who mock you can become your biggest fans, if you're brave enough to be yourself." "We didn't win them over by being perfect," John said. "We won them over by being real, by showing them that we weren't just some manufactured pop group, but four guys from Liverpool who loved music and weren't afraid to fight for it." The man in the suit, who gave John the thumbs up, was later identified as Robert Harrison, a music critic for the Washington Post. He wrote, "I came to the Beatles concert ready to write a scathing review. I left a fan, not because they were perfect, but because they were honest. They didn't try to be American. They didn't try to be what we expected. They were just themselves. And that's what made them extraordinary." Today, the Washington Coliseum has a plaque commemorating that night. On this stage, February 11, 1964, the Beatles transformed from British curiosity to American phenomenon. They arrived to mockery. They left to love, proving that authenticity will always triumph over expectation. Music historians consider the Washington concert more important than Ed Sullivan. Ed Sullivan introduced the Beatles to America, one historian wrote, but Washington, D.C. proved they deserved to be there. The bootleg recordings from that night are some of the most treasured Beatles recordings, not because the sound quality is good. It's terrible, but because you can hear the transformation. You can hear the boos at the beginning, the uncertainty, the hostility, and then you can hear it change, song by song, moment by moment, until by the end, you're hearing pure love. Paul McCartney, now in his 80s, still talks about that night. "People ask me about our greatest performance," he says, "and I always say Washington, D.C., not because we played perfectly. We didn't, but because we overcame. We walked into that arena with half the audience wanting us to fail, and we walked out with all of them wanting us to succeed. That's not just good music," Paul says, "that's transformation." Ringo Starr says, "Washington taught us that we could handle anything. If we could win over that crowd, we could win over anyone." George Harrison, before his death, said something that captures the essence of that night. "The Beatles weren't born on Ed Sullivan," George said. "We were born in Washington, D.C., in a boxing arena, surrounded by people who didn't believe in us. That's where we learned who we really were." The story of the Beatles in Washington, D.C. reminds us that greatness often comes from adversity, that the moments when we're mocked can become the moments when we're made. That authenticity will always triumph over expectation, and that sometimes the greatest performances come from the deepest challenges. The Beatles were humiliated at their first concert in America. The boos, the laughter, the mockery, but they didn't let it break them. They let it fuel them, and by their second song, they had transformed an arena full of doubters into an arena full of believers, not through tricks, not through gimmicks, but through honest, raw, undeniable talent. That's the real legacy of that night. Not that the Beatles were great, but that they proved greatness comes from being yourself, even when the world wants you to be something else. The Beatles were humiliated at their first concert. In the United States, the boos were real, the mockery was brutal, the doubt was overwhelming. But by their second song, everything changed. Not because they changed who they were, but because they refused to be anything but themselves. And that authenticity, that refusal to be broken by mockery, that determination to play music their way, that's what conquered America. That's what changed music forever. And that's what reminds us all that the greatest victory comes not from avoiding mockery, but from transforming it into fuel, into fire, into something that changes the world.